Okay, so Dave, welcome back.
Yep, we're back again.
There's two beards and a Bible. And today we are going to be looking in Matthew chapter 2. We're going to begin reading starting at verse 13 in just a moment. And this is dealing with the flight into Egypt and the subsequent return to Nazareth. So let's go ahead and get started with the scripture, and then we'll get in and talk about it a little bit. So chapter 2 of Matthew, starting at verse 13, says, "Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, 'Arise, take the young child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I bring you word. For Herod will seek the young child to destroy him.' When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed for Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, 'Out of Egypt I called my son.' Then Herod went when he saw, Then Herod, when he saw that he was deceived by the wise men, was exceedingly angry, and he sent forth and put to death all of the male children who were in Bethlehem and all its districts from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, 'A voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation, weeping, and great mourning. Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted, because they are no more.'" In verse 19, "Now when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, 'Arise and take the young child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel. For those who sought the young child's life are dead.' Then he arose, took the young child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea instead of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned by God in a dream, he turned aside into the region of Galilee. And he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene."
Okay, so in Luke chapter 2 and verse 39, that's the parallel to this, and it says, "So when they had performed all things according to the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee to their own city Nazareth, and the child grew and became strong in spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him." Just like you, John.
So as we see there, we see that an angel of the Lord gave a warning. Gave a warning to Joseph, and what was that warning?
He said, "Hey, you got to get out of here."
Yeah, there are people that are seeking the life of your child, of Christ.
Absolutely. How fast did he get out of there?
He left right away.
He left that night.
Forthwith. He went by night. Yeah, absolutely, traveling to be sort of hidden and to stay out of harm's way.
It's interesting. You think about Joseph. I mean, it kind of speaks to his faith that when God told him to do something, he did it immediately.
Right.
And I think there's probably a sermon in there somewhere.
I'm sure there is.
What are some other characters in the Bible that, when they were told to do something, they did it. They did what they were told to do.
Abraham and Noah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's certainly, we have these things written as an example, that we might learn. Human beings don't tend to learn real well from secondhand experiences.
Yes.
But we should.
Yeah.
Sometimes we like to learn it ourselves, but by that time it's too late.
Yeah.
And we have these warnings and these examples, of how people that were pleasing in the sight of God acted,
Yep.
how they did what the Lord bid them to do and did it quickly. Yeah. And we should also do those.
When God says go, Joseph went. There's definitely a lesson in there. I think I've heard a sermon called that.
Yeah.
When God said go, and then it had these, and I don't even know if this was one of his points.
That's a good one. I'm going to write that down.
There you go. I don't remember who preached that.
So, what prophecy was fulfilled when Joseph took the child into Egypt?
Jeremiah 31:5, I believe. I can go over there and try to find that real quick here. Here's Jeremiah chapter 31, and in verse 5, it says, You shall not plant vines on the mountains of Samaria. The planters shall plant and eat them as ordinary food. That doesn't sound right, John.
In Hosea 11 at verse 1.
It's 31:15. I'm sorry. Let me.
You turn there.
Thus says the Lord, a voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted for her children because they are no more. Of course, that's talking about what? It's talking about all the babies that were killed there because of Herod.
Right. And Hosea 11:1, it also says, out of Egypt I shall call my son.
Yeah.
And there we have that happening as well.
So you had a different scripture than I had.
Right.
But they
Go
were
figure
both
that out.
pertaining to the same thing.
Right.
Wow.
And that's there's a lesson in that. When we look through the scriptures, they can be understood, and they do make sense, and they do mesh together. They do tell a cohesive account.
I think people look at the Bible and they think, I could never understand that, especially if you look at the King James and you're like, what am I reading, Shakespeare? Because it's the same kind of language. It's very poetic.
They call it a collection of stories, and then when you factor into it that several men had a hand in writing it, then that causes people's hackles to go up, and they think, well, that can't possibly be a cohesive work, but we understand that God, through the Spirit, put forth the Word, and it does. It is cohesive. It does match up. You can just as we saw just a moment ago, there's several places in the Scriptures when you're asking any one question, you can get validation. Throughout the Scriptures.
Some people, they have trouble believing that this is a book that was written by God and left for man. And I would encourage anyone, if you've never read the Bible, read the Bible. Even if you don't believe the things in the Bible, it's a great literary work, probably the greatest in the world. Any well-read, educated person would have read the Bible. But one thing that you'll notice when you read the Bible, this is the thing that made me believe that Jesus was real and that God was real and that this Bible was written by God, is when you read the Bible, it seems to come from one mind. And it was written over a 2,500 year period. And that was the thing that basically made me a believer. I said, this isn't possible.
Right.
This couldn't have happened.
Right.
I mean, there had to have been some other supernatural power at work here for this book to have been written.
Absolutely. So. Yeah. And as we look into the Scriptures, we understand, speaking of like dispensations of time, we're going to read here in just a moment, or at least speak to the idea that, Joseph learned of the death of Herod by
an angel.
Yeah. Can we expect an angel to come down and talk to us today and tell us what to do?
I mean, those days have gone.
Yeah. When you speaking of, and maybe as we progress on through lessons, we'll maybe get to the idea of the dispensations of time and the fact that we are now in this New Testament period. Yeah. We're in the last days, as it is also pointed out in Scripture. And people take that out of context.
Briefly, just to talk about it, you had the first period, which was the patriarchal period, where God spoke directly to the fathers or the heads of the household. And then you had what would be the Mosaic period. Is that what they call that? The period where the Jews were God's special people. That was a period. And today we have the Christian period. God has communicated to man different ways during each of those periods. The first time he communicated directly. The second time during the Mosaic period, he communicated through his prophets. And this last time he communicates through his son and the apostles who wrote down his written word. We have this is the way God talks to us today.
Right. And, and we need to, like we started out talking about, we need to listen. Just as Joseph learned of the death of Herod and understood that it was now safe,
Yes.
and acted accordingly. Where did he go when he heard that Herod?
I believe he went back to his home region. Now, he went to Nazareth.
Right.
Which is funny, is like, there for years and years, archaeologists thought this was like a mythical place.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever done any research about that?
No.
There was no proof of Nazareth for up until the last century.
Uh-huh.
And then they found this. They found some evidence that this was a small town. I guess it had about 50 or 60 people in it. So it's
Okay.
That's why it probably wasn't written much about, and also probably why you think about who was it? Was it Philip that said, can anything good come from Nazareth? Mm-hmm. Was that Philip that said that?
I can't place the
origin
of that.
We're gonna get to it.
But similarly, in recent times, fairly recent times, it's Sodom and Gomorrah is believed to have been found, and that was another place that wasn't, it was just believed that was some fable in the scriptures. But there's some interesting information about where they believe they found that, and the evidence of the intense heat that took that city down.
You think about Jesus, he goes. Joseph takes him to Nazareth, to this little bitty burg, and that's where Jesus grows up. And he's obviously he's a humble man from a humble town. His father and brother, they're all carpenters, which even today is a humble profession. I mean, it's not a high, and I do a little bit of that work myself, so it's not a glorious job that people get really excited about.
Right, and it speaks to, again, how we should be as well.
Yes.
When you look at the religious world, people have turned that, even just physically looking at the places where they worship, gold leaf and all kinds of fancy things going on there, and we don't see that Christ was a flashy person. We wouldn't, from what we understand of him in the scriptures, we wouldn't expect him to be happy with such a thing.
Right. Even, you see the way, some of those who call themselves preachers or whatever, the way they dress or present themselves, and you got to say, Jesus didn't do that.
And as I think back, and this, I'll promise I won't stay off topic very long, but growing up, having attended a denominational church growing up, one of the things that I remember, and as I think back and I think of just how showy and flashy it was, the preacher would, when the music started, the doxology or whatever, the song that the organist would play at the beginning of the service, and the preacher would walk down the aisle with their hands in the air with a long robe on, and just make a big show going down the aisle. And you think, when you really boil that down, that wasn't about praising God. That was about drawing attention to themselves.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Pomp and circumstance, and as you pointed out, Christ came from the humblest of beginnings, continued to have a humble life that didn't have that kind of an attitude.
Yep,
throughout his life. So as we move on in Luke 2, starting at verse 40, I think you're already in, or no, you're in Jeremiah. Let's go over to Luke.
Is that my turn to read? Luke chapter 2.
I think it actually falls on me, because
is it?
Yeah. So Luke 2, starting at verse 40. We won't fight over who's reading.
Okay.
Luke 2, starting at verse 40, said, "And the child grew and became strong in spirit, filled with wisdom and grace of God, and the grace of God was upon him. His parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem according to the custom of the feast. When they had finished the days, as they returned, the boy Jesus lingered behind in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his mother did not know it. But supposing him to have been in the company, they went a day's journey and sought him among their relatives and acquaintances. So when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem seeking him. Now, so it was that after 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, both listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. So when they saw him, they were amazed. And his mother said to him, 'Son, why have you done this to us? Look, your father and I have sought you anxiously.' And he said to them, 'Why did you seek me? Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business?' But they did not understand the statement which he spoke to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was subject to them. But his mother kept all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men."
John, you ever lose one of your kids?
Not for that long. That was my first thought here, is that, could you imagine leaving your child, leaving on a journey and not knowing where they were for an entire day? But when you think about who that child was, I imagine, that he probably didn't give them much trouble, and they probably didn't much worry.
Yeah.
And they were in a group of people. It'd be like a couple of families leaving and going on a trip, and kid riding this many miles with this family and this many miles with that family, and it could certainly happen.
I know one time Charlie had wandered off. Charlie's my son, and he wandered off into one of the back fields with some of the other kids, and he wasn't doing anything wrong. He just neglected to tell us that he was going to go. So he was about half a mile away from the house. I tell you what, we lost our minds. And it was about, 45 minutes we couldn't find him.
Yeah.
And then, I don't think we wore him out, but I sure wanted to.
It's a sinking feeling.
Yeah, so it's a terrible feeling.
We've definitely had that. Amongst my children, we have one that used to be a runner, and used to, on purpose, try to be funny and hide from us.
Oh, I know which one that was.
You probably do. And Anderson shall remain nameless.
Yes.
So, anyways, we see that sort of thing is going on here, and that they were traveling for the as it was their custom for the feast, and when they had noticed that he was missing, and they went back and backtracked their steps and found him. I think this is one of my favorite things to think about, the answer that he gave to his parents. Why did you seek me? Didn't you know that I would be about my Father's business?
Right.
And that's there's a lesson in that for every Christian, every human being on this earth, is that's what we should be doing.
Yeah. I read that this trip that they're taking to Jerusalem, apparently that was something that all Hebrew males had to do 3 times a year. And one commentator said that this was probably the first year Jesus had gone. Because he was at that age. It was, I guess, about 12, 13 years old is when they started doing this. Mm-hmm. When Hebrew males had to start fulfilling this requirement.
Right.
But could you imagine the same thing as, that was like, I don't know, a week-long journey from where they lived to get there, and a week back, and they were probably there. So they're gone 2.5, 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. There was an expense incurred to do that.
Right.
All your, if they were farmers or whatever, they just had responsibilities at home, same as we do today.
And there again, these are things that were required.
They were
by God, and they found a means to do to do that. They just did it. Yeah. Just the same as we were talking before. When God says do something, They did it. Joseph, acted quickly when God told him to, through the angel, told him to take shelter and find safety. And did just that and continued that through life, being faithful. And, when we think about us today, there may be times when it's inconvenient to gather with the saints. We could have something else going on that day, but we need to have our priorities straight. There's a lesson in that.
Whatever we put first, is what's most important to us.
Yeah, whatever you whatever you deem as important in your life, you'll find time for it.
Absolutely.
People find time and the means by which to go to many sports games and to do all manner of things. But as you can tell from the numbers and attendance and religious assemblies, the religious assemblies on a whole, let alone the church, it's dwindling. And
it is.
People they are not about the Father's business.
I did see something today in the news that there's this Catholic fella that has a podcast about the Bible. And I guess this week, it's the most popular podcast on Apple. So I guess one thing that is encouraging about that is there are apparently, we've got some, we're going through some tough times with all this virus stuff. But people, when that happens, people turn to God. Yeah. And I think that's an example of that. People are searching for, information to find out about God. They want to hear words of comfort.
Right. And it's important that, if you're listening to this and you're a Christian, it's important that you be there for those people that are searching.
Absolutely.
That you are there with the truth to help them to understand the truth of the Word. Because there are many people that are out there that are willing and ready to lead them astray. Maybe not all of them knowingly, but there are certainly many ways to be led astray in religious things. The other thing that stuck out to me and is the statement about Mary, and how we've seen this a couple of times as we've been reading, is that she kept these things in her heart. She didn't quite understand what was going on with his statement and why did you seek me, but she kept these things in her heart. What do you think of that statement?
I think, it seems like, she said this before, when she first had, I believe when Elizabeth prophesied, she said, she made a similar statement.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, it was an interesting situation she was in.
Yeah.
She surely didn't understand all of the ramifications of these things. But
she knew that this child was told and brought to her in a very miraculous way, and was foretold by an angel.
Yeah.
And she knew that there's something special going on here.
There was something special. So I think this probably wasn't the only thing she kept in her heart. I mean, if you had raised the Son of God, I'm sure that there were every day there would have been something.
Would have been something that made you say,
wow.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, that's probably a good place to start at this point, or to stop at this point. Yeah. We've done started. So it's a good place to stop, and we'll pick up with looking into Matthew 3 here in just a little bit for the next lesson.
Okay. Thank you.